I've always had Wallace and Dan in my life. These two are not just my best friends, they're the closest thing to a family that I've ever had. I can't remember a time when they weren't a part of my life. It's not a matter of obsessing over one another. They've just always been there for me. I care for them like they're my own foot or an arm. They just have to be there for things to work, you know. Things weren't going so well for me back in those days. Most of the time I sat at home isolating myself. I didn't eat much. I slept even worse. I was stuck in a dark place and I couldn't really force myself out of it. Luckily, I didn't have to. I had people in my life who cared enough to take that step for me, and my buddies were adamant about bringing me back on my feet. Straighten my back, so to speak. Wallace put together a bit of a celebration. First, drinks at his place, chicken wings, cheese snacks, and poker. And then take an Uber downtown for more drinks and meeting some people. And Dan had some friends from work that we were going to hang out with. Good people, like a work family, he said. It's not my usual deal, but I could see that I needed to make an effort. So I dug around in my closet until I found something colorful and went to spend a night with the boys. We were originally going to Dan's place, but his sister was in town and needed to crash on his couch. She was welcome to come along, but she wasn't up to it. So at the last minute, we switched to Wallace's place, a row house on a rundown street, but in a good part of town. The kind of street that has a cigarette-infused corner shop just across from Whole Foods. Wallace and Dan met me out by the curb. I don't think he's taken his medicine, Wally, said Dan. Oh, I'd have to agree, Dan, said Wally. They always did this thing when they kept repeating each other's names when they wanted to make a point. I could see where this was going a mile away. Oh, good thing we had a chat with Dr. Heineken, nodded Dan. We know your dosage. And if we got it wrong, we have 3 six-packs of second opinions from Nurse Guinness, added Wallace. Nurses can't write prescriptions, I added. They can in Canada, grinned Dan. Look it up, it's true. This don't look like Ontario to me, I said, but I get your point. The man is down bad, huffed Wallace. He's gonna need all the help that he can get. We settled down around the dinner table, had some chicken wings, a couple of beers, and talked for a while. Wallace had a pretty bare-bones place, not much stuff on the walls. A living room, a bedroom, and a small guest room that doubled as emergency storage. It was the kind of bachelor pad that had a slight echo to it if you listened closely. But it had all the essentials. A nice couch, a big TV, and a bed that hadn't had its sheets changed for a solid 2 months. And Dan talked a lot about his sister coming to town, how she kept nagging him about pointless things, how he was the one helping her out, and she acted like she was the one taking care of him. I'm not the one who cheated on my husband and got kicked out, Dan scoffed. I'm not the one who quit my job on a whim to slack on my little brother's couch. Yeah, you're right, Wallace added. You'd be very faithful to your husband. Bless your heart. And damn straight, Dan nodded. Too bad I'm into women. Ah, shame, I said. I'd marry you. Of course you would. You both would. I'm amazing. Wallace whipped out a deck of cards and put on something from Netflix in the background. Some reality show. Wallace usually liked to have a lot of sounds going on around him. He didn't like it when things got too quiet. He was from a big family, so it didn't take much for him to feel alone. I was on the opposite side of the spectrum, being an only child, and Dan was somewhere in the middle. And the two of them might sound like idiots, but they were more successful than people give them credit for. Wallace worked with overseas shipping, and Dan was a shift manager at a bottling plant. Not the kind of titles that needed years of study to reach, but the kind of positions that require a good head on your shoulders. They were solid people, great under pressure, and honest to a fault. We played a couple of rounds, chit-chatting between games. Wallace was a great bluffer. The only thing you can know for sure is that whatever you thought he had something different. But when you figure that out, he changes to something else. He's the kind of player who always plays the person and not the cards, and he's good at it. Dan, on the other hand, is a complete wild card. He can go all in on the most random nonsense, but he can also quit when he's far ahead. He's a complete fluke, but sometimes that's what it takes to beat a guy like Wallace. We had been playing for about an hour when I had to go and use the bathroom. I hurried away, locked the door, did my business, and I reached for a towel to dry off my hands. Problem was, Wallace's bathroom was downright nasty. Toothpaste flicks on the bathroom mirror as a funky smell seeps into the guest hand towels. I could tell that they had been there for a while. Most things had this faint yellow tinge. I decided to get a fresh towel. I figured he had a couple hidden away for fancy company, and so I dug through a pile of fresh laundry. Nothing peculiar there. I dug around some more. As I did, I heard the guys call out from the other room, telling me where to find more toilet paper if I needed it. There was a cabinet under the sink, a big one. It didn't have any handles, but I could tell that you could open it. There was a magnet on the side. And so I slid a finger in there and I pulled it open. I think it had some kind of lock because there was a bit of a forceful click. I think that I broke it. Something small spilled out and moved across my arms. Maggots. Fat little white things contracting and extending in a sickly rhythm. They were all over the inside of the cabinet. At first, it looked like Wallace had crammed a big black trash bag in there, but looking a little bit closer, the details got clearer. It was a corpse. The body was wrapped in a black shirt and dark jeans. No shoes or socks. It had decayed into a desaturated grayish green, almost mummified. Thin brown hair stretching down a wrinkled forehead, a wide open mouth and hollowed out eyes. Bone-yellowed teeth like bars to an insect prison. That's where the smell came from. It wasn't just an unwashed bathroom, there was a dead body. A real, actual deceased human body. "You okay in there?" Wallace called out. "You need something?" "I'm good." My voice was cracking. My arms shook as my heartbeat engulfed every other second. I tried brushing off the maggots that crawled up on me, but I kept finding more and more. I had to think fast. I brought out my phone and dropped it on the floor, squashing another maggot. I picked the phone back up and snapped a couple of pictures of the body, and then I grabbed a handful of toilet paper, cleaned up the maggots that had gotten out, and flushed them. I put everything back the way that it was, but the door kept swinging open a little. I washed my hands again and stood by the mirror for a moment. I honestly thought that I was having a nightmare. I couldn't fathom this being something real. A dead body in Wallace's bathroom. No wonder he didn't want us to be here for the pre-party. No wonder he was asking what was taking me so long. If he thought I knew, what would he do? I wiped my hands on the nasty hand towels and I went back outside. The air felt warmer, but I think it was just me. Dan had brought out a cheese plate and some crackers. My eyes got stuck on the sharp cheese knife that was waiting on the far side of the table. As I sat down, Dan handed it to me away from Wallace. "You gotta try this cheddar," he said. I don't care for Wisconsin, but this thing might just change my mind. Yeah, I'll try it, I muttered. A little piece. My honorable dude, I'm giving you 3. You're gonna want 3. All right. Wallace had this ambient smile, and he noticed me staring. His face, it didn't move a muscle. I'm sure that he could see something in me had changed, but he didn't buckle. He just let my eyes stick to his. It's good cheese, Wallace smiled. I think you'll like it. Gotta pace myself, I said. The stomach's not what it used to be. Yeah, you were in there a long time, he continued. A real long time. We played a couple more rounds, passing the cheese plate around. Whenever Wallace picked it up, he did this little flick of the wrist that gave the blade a whooshing noise, like he held it upside down and then flicked it up with a swoosh. It kept breaking my concentration, and I lost 3 hands in a row. It wasn't even close. I didn't have the slightest idea of what to do. I had pictures on my phone. I could excuse myself and call the police, but could I leave Dan alone with them? Should I bring him along? But wouldn't Wallace figure out that I knew if I suddenly got up and left? There was also the possibility that I was wrong somehow, that Wallace hadn't done anything and that this was something else. The body looked really old. If it had been fresh, the whole building would have smelled like death. The body, it must have been dead for months. But that didn't matter. Wallace had lived here for years. Dan took a short break to use the bathroom, leaving me alone with Wallace. The reality show lingered in the background, covering the room in Valley Girl banter. Wallace kept his eyes on me as I held the cheese plate near. More importantly, I kept the knife close. I thought you didn't want to rush your stomach, he said. You're hogging the cheese there. I guess Dan was right, I nodded. It's good. Mind handing me that knife? He asked. I want to cut a few slices. How many you want? I asked. I want to do it myself, he said. No offense, but you cut them too thick. No, it's fine, I got you, I insisted. How many you want? A frown formed on Wallace's face. Subtle, but it was there. Not suspicion, but something else. Frustration. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe I was getting away with it. The discussion burst like a bubble as Dan came back with a vengeance. Salt, lemon, tequila shots. All the while I could tell Wallace had noticed me keeping a close eye on that cheese knife. The reality show got stuck on a "Are you still watching?" verification check, underlining just how quiet things had gotten. Just the sound of cards being shuffled and flipped, the occasional clink of a glass. Dan offered me another shot, but I turned it down. My head was already swimming. You want something fancier? He asked. It is a special night. Now's a good time to ask. Nah, really, I'm good, I said. A thought crossed my mind and I held up a finger. I pointed to Wallace as casually as my body allowed it. By the way, I continued, don't you have that other card game in your car? The one with the white cards and the nasty jokes? In my car? Wallace asked. You sure? Yeah, I think you brought it along last time that we went out. Funny, Wallace said. That's funny. No, really, I insisted. I'm pretty sure that you had it. Wallace didn't quite catch what I was going for. Dan, on the other hand, got up from his chair and pointed at the bedroom. He means Cards Against Humanity, Wally. I think you got it in your bedroom. Dan wandered off before I could protest. I had wanted to get Wallace separated so I could show Dan what was in the bathroom. Now I was stuck with Wallace again. He gave me a curious look. "You good?" he asked. "You don't seem all there, you know." I didn't know what to say, and by the time I figured out a good enough lie, too much time had passed. He could tell that I wasn't being genuine. Despite all the drinks that I had had, my tongue was as dry as sand. I gave him a shrug and sipped my lukewarm Heineken. "I don't know," I said. It's been crazy." "Yeah, you're telling me," he chuckled. "Man, I get it. It's like when it rains, it pours, you know. One day and it's all upside down, inside out." "Yeah," I nodded. "Sometimes it all just, happens." The image of the dead body flashed in my mind. The strangest details stuck with me, like how long the teeth looked behind the retracted gums. Were all teeth that long? It made me hyper-aware of my own mouth, making me smack my lips. "Change takes time," Wallace nodded. "We're here if you need it." And with that, he leaned across the table. I thought he was going to pat me on the hand, but instead, he snatched the cheese plate and the knife. He grinned as he cut up a piece of cheddar and giving me a smile. "No hogging the cheese," he grinned. "Not cool." Dan came back empty-handed. He had found some other board games, but he figured we shouldn't start Monopoly this late. Besides, it didn't go well with tequila. So we turned back to poker. Wallace put on another episode of that show. We discussed the details of where we were going and who we were going to meet. Wallace kept talking about this guy from work that couldn't be there, to the point where it made me take note. It was strange for Wallace to bring it up out of the blue. No one had asked. Was he inadvertently telling us who the corpse was? "I don't have a lot of friends at work," Wallace admitted. "I think y'all would like Chris. He's a nice guy." "He can be the nicest guy in the world, but we're going out for the dames," Dan said, matter-of-factly. "That's just the way it is." "Why couldn't Chris come?" I asked. "Is he busy?" "Not sure," Wallace said with a shrug. "Preoccupied." During our next couple of rounds, I had another tactic. I made sure that our glasses were topped off. Both me and Dan had already used the bathroom, so I figured I could get Wallace to go next. That would give me some time alone with Dan. I made sure that everybody drank, and like clockwork, Wallace excused himself for the restroom. As soon as he locked the door, I fumbled my phone out of my pocket. Dan didn't notice anything at first, but as soon as he saw my demeanor shift, a worry settled over him. I unlocked my phone and put a finger to my lips. "Look," I whispered. "We gotta call for help. There's a dead body in there." "What?" It's like he didn't register the words. I might as well have spoken a foreign language. It went in one ear and out the other. "A dead body," I repeated. "Look, I saved it." I showed him the pictures that I took. He scrolled back and forth and scoffed a little. He was laughing as if I was telling a joke. I realized the light in the pictures wasn't the best, and it didn't help that I was holding the phone from a weird angle. It probably just looked like a garbage bag covered in white sprinkles. "It's not a joke," I assured him. "It's really there, right under the sink, stuffed in like a..." The toilet flushed. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked up at Dan. His smile had faded a little, but I could see that he wasn't understanding. Perhaps in his world, what I was saying was impossible. So before Wallace got back, I leaned back and whispered, "See for yourself. Go back in. Check under the sink." Wallace came back and sat back down, and Dan gave me another look and headed to the bathroom without a word. For the third time, I was alone with Wallace. This time, he could tell that I was upset. I couldn't hide it. Not after talking to Dan like that. "You're really not looking well," said Wallace. "Maybe we shouldn't go out." "Maybe," I nodded. "We'll just see how this plays out." "What do you mean?" he asked. What's gonna play out?" Wallace leaned over the poker table, keeping the cheese knife close to his body. I listened for Dan to react to the body in the bathroom, but there was nothing. Maybe he was already calling for help while I kept Wallace busy. Whatever," I said. "Whatever happens, happens." "Whatever happens, happens," Wallace laughed. "Mister, I need to know where all bathrooms are at all times. Want to tell me whatever happens, happens. Now I know that you're not all right." "Well, maybe I'm not," I said, throwing up my arms. "Maybe I'm not okay." "Well, is something bothering you?" he pressed on. "Is it something that I did?" "I think it might be," I nodded. "It might be something that you did." I've never been the kind of person to confront people out of the blue, especially not people that I care about. But I had had a couple of drinks and I wasn't feeling like myself anymore. Hell, nothing felt real anymore. It's like I had fallen into some kind of bizarro world where one of my best friends had turned into a cold-blooded murderer. But there was no mistaking what I had seen. Dan got out of the bathroom, and in the split second where Wallace looked up, I snatched the cheese knife from the plate, leaving the cheddar. There was the harsh noise of metal scraping against ceramic as I jumped out of my chair, holding the knife as a weapon. Wallace got up from his chair and stepped away from the table. Dan backed away with a quiet, "Whoa, whoa, whoa." I pointed at Dan with my free hand. "Dan, call the police," I said. "Call them right now." "What are you doing?" Wallace yelled. "Put the knife down." "What, so you can take it?" I snapped back. "You want to put us under the sink too?" Wallace shook his head, as if trying to rattle the confusion out of his mind. He took a deep breath and he looked me in the eye. "What exactly is the problem here?" he asked. "The problem is you have a body stuffed under your sink." Wallace cocked his head, and with a shrug he said, "So?" Out of all the things he could have said, that's the one that surprised me the most. I thought he was going to defend himself or straight up deny it. But no, he didn't seem to mind this at all. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't know what to feel. "Dan saw it too," I said. "I took photos, I showed him." "Yeah," said Dan. "Yeah, I saw it." I turned to him. Dan was lined up against the wall, holding his hands like he was at gunpoint. Dan shot Wallace with an accusatory look. "I can't believe you stuffed that thing under your sink," he said, shaking his head. "That's lazy even for you." My feet felt light and my head was heavy. It's like there were so many thoughts pushing into my head that I had trouble keeping my neck straight. Like I was being crushed from the top down. A darkness sunk straight through my heart and settled in my stomach, burning with gastric acid all the way down. "It's temporary," said Wallace. "Bad timing. Haven't had time to move it." "You need my truck, Wally?" Dan asked. "I know it's tough to clean." "Oh, I should be good," Wallace shrugged. "It's only ash and bone and won't leave a trace." They were talking like I wasn't there, like I wasn't holding a knife. And did one of them have some kind of hidden weapon? How could they not see me as a threat? I unlocked my phone and dialed the emergency services, but I left my hand off the call button. That got their attention. Whoa, 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 said Dan. You serious? What do you think you're doing? I'm not letting you turn murder into a joke. That's what I'm doing. Holy God, he's blanking, said Wallace. Oh crap, you're right, said Dan. He is blanking. I held the phone up with my finger on the call button. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't make sense of what they were saying. I didn't know what to do. And I was just as ready to start swinging that knife around as I was calling for help. My nerves were a coin toss from fight, flight, or come what may. You're not making any sense, I wheezed. None of you. Wallace held up an open hand. Look, I'm sorry, he said. We didn't realize what was going on. This has gotta be traumatic. Just put the phone down, said Dan. You can keep the knife. I shook my head. I did nothing. No calling, no cutting, no yelling or screaming. I just observed them and waited for a solution to reveal itself. Wallace stepped out from behind the poker table. The reality show was still rolling in the background. Two girls with white accents arguing loudly over a birthday cake. We're celebrating, said Wallace slowly. You remember that part, right? Yeah, I said. We're going out. A guy's night out, yeah, he continued. Do you know why? I've been having a hard time, I said. You wanted to take me out. That's not a celebration, Dan added. That's just being good people. This is a celebration. Do you remember what we're celebrating? Wallace asked. Do you know that part? I didn't. Thinking back on it, there was a bit of a muddled cloud over that part. It had come pretty much out of nowhere. The guys had invited me out and I accepted without a second thought. Like we had done it before, but I couldn't remember when or why. Sometimes when you do things you wouldn't do, we blank out, Wallace added. Happens to a lot of newbies. What kind of sentence is that? I let out a joyless laugh. The knife in my hand shook, and long after the laugh was gone, the shaking remained. You're not you, said Dan from the sidelines. None of us are. We're different, Wallace nodded. Better. Wallace pointed to the bathroom, taking a step closer. That's me in there, he said. The real me. But I'm real too. Wallace took another step forward and extended a hand. Give me something, he said. The phone or the knife, or both, but you gotta trust me. I don't even understand what you're saying, I said. How the hell am I supposed to trust you? Because you know me. You know Dan. You've known us long before we got here. We're the same brood, man. Brothers. Brood, Dan scoffed, shaking his head. I don't like that word. Dan, not the time, Wallace said, rolling his eyes. Dan held up a hand apologetically and shuffled away from the wall. Wallace was right in front of me. He slowly placed a hand on the blade of my knife. The Valley girls on the TV were laughing now. Drama solved. The cake was safe. I can tell you that we helped you, said Wallace. I can tell you that you're the youngest, but no matter the words, you can still feel it. You know you can trust us. But I didn't know anything. I had a murderer wrapping his hands around my weapon and I was hesitating. I couldn't stop that image. That black shirt, those dark jeans, the plop of a fat maggot hitting the ceramic tiles. You want me to show you? Wallace asked. You want the truth? I didn't. I really didn't. I just wanted to go home and forget the entire night. To go back to the time where we were just gonna go out for drinks, a guy's night. and yet I released the knife and nodded. Wallace dropped it to the floor. "Yeah," I sobbed. "I want the truth." We went out the back door. Dan was in no position to drive, but I saw him lean over a fence and do this strange hulking movement. After a couple seconds, his stomach rippled and a transparent glob of jelly rolled out of him like a hairball. And then he was fine, sober even. No slurred speech, no swinging movement. He went and got his pickup truck. Wallace cleaned up the maggots and wrapped the cabinet in plastic. Once Dan got back, the two of them carried it to the truck and secured it with bright plastic straps. All three of us had to pile in the front seat, sitting side by side. Any other night of my life, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but now it felt like surrender. They played music and talked, and Dan had to call his work friends and tell them that we weren't coming to the club. Wallace seemed a bit peeved about it, but there was too much to do. At least, that's what it sounded like. Dan's position at the bottling plant allowed him access to a warehouse, and with that, he could get to some shipping containers. We rolled past a gate with an armed guard. Dan seemed to know him and they waved at each other. Apparently, it wasn't that unusual for Dan to drop by unannounced late at night on the weekend. We parked. Wallace and Dan got the cabinet. As they did, they gave me a tired look. "Oh, you might as well help," said Wallace. "You're gonna have us carry this on our own." I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if I was still gonna call for help or not. It felt like a part of my conscience had taken a physical beating, like the decision-making part of my brain was swollen. The two of them just stood there waiting for me to lend a hand. They weren't gonna move until I did, and so I helped them. I could feel something frail and dry rolling around in the cabinet as we moved, like bags of old cigars. 3 guys and an improvised coffin. Our footsteps echoed against the metal walls. Hollow containers in neutral colors, most of which were rusted or scheduled for destruction. We went to the far end of the building and put down the cabinet. We all took a moment to catch our breath. The container in front of us was just like all the others. The same neutral color, similar serial numbers, same company logo, a faded blue sunflower print. Dan stepped up and clicked the lock open, and then he gave me some space and Wallace tapped me on the shoulder. "When you're ready." The container was slightly ajar. Dan was using a little flashlight from his keychain, casting my shadow across the door. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I could walk away and never know for sure, or I could fling those doors wide open. There might be nothing inside and I'd have 2 of my friends murder me. Or there would be something inside that I would be unable to understand. But as long as I was out there with my hand on the door, I could be anything. A guy being pranked, a victim, a murderer. As long as that door stayed closed, I was all of it at once. But I had to know which one was real. The door swung open with a rusty whine. There was a lot of plastic and a lot of chemicals, vacuum-sealed bags. A hand on my shoulder urged me forward. Another hand reached ahead, pointing at one of the corners. "There," Dan said. "That's you." And with that, I broke into 1,000 screaming pieces. My head had just been in a dark place these last few weeks. It had been a real, actual space. Somewhere dark and fractured. Somewhere you are born and dying in the same heartbeat, dreaming of life. And somewhere in there, I had dreamt of me. A life not my own but someone else's. But I had dreamt it so clearly and so vividly that I wanted it as my own. I remember barking, hunched, skulking behind the trash cans. How I had practiced standing and talking and walking, changing. Dan and Wallace had helped me. I knew them from before. There was a body in that container that looked like me. It had succumbed to my dream and it had been replaced. And I had wanted so bad for that dream to be real that I had forgotten. I had blanked. There was a body and that body was me. Those were my eyes, unblinking as another fly drank itself fat off my cold skin. "You'll get there, buddy," Dan muttered. "Take your time." My mind cycled. I was real, but I wasn't real. I had thoughts, but they weren't mine. I had done all I could to get away from that dark, but it was still there. The more I thought about it, the more I felt it. I stood there on my knees, looking at my broken face, lit up by a faint pocket light, my eyes looking back at me from behind a sheet of plastic. But those were never my eyes. In so many ways, we were alike, but we weren't the same. Wallace and Dan took me home later that night. They closed the container and locked it back up. We weren't going to use it anymore, and there were no more bodies to hide. The gang was all here, and this ordeal was going to disappear forever. From that night on, there would be nothing and no one that could say I wasn't me. They could run every test on my body, ask me any question, and check every atom of my being. I am me, but in every other way, I am not. It's such an alien thought to live with. This one thing is such a small part of my life, but it changes everything. I know that I'm no different from what I dreamed I'd be, but that doesn't change the fact that it never happened to me. I wasn't the one who had graduated high school or got my driver's license. That was another body, one that I dreamed of. And yet I know all about it. I could point my math teacher out in a crowd, even though I had never really seen the man with these eyes. I'm just a copy. But Dan and Wallace were different. Not only were they my real friends, they were also something more, something other. And even on that level, we are family. I know there are others, but they're not like us. They're not brood. They want more than to step out of the dark. It's been some time since poker night. The guys originally took me out to celebrate my arrival or crossing the line. I was the last addition to the group and we had finished the replacement just a couple of days prior. I had gone so far into my new life that I completely blanked on what we had done. I still can't see it clearly. It's like smoke in a nightmare. We still play poker sometimes, not to celebrate but just for fun. I still go to work and laugh and joke. I can enjoy a cold beer and watch my favorite show. But there's always that nagging voice in the back of my mind. Am I really enjoying this? Or am I convincing myself that I like this? Am I laughing because that's what I dreamt I should? Or because I find something funny? Where does what's real end and I begin? I don't know why I'm posting this. It's just throwing a message in a bottle into the void of the internet, I suppose. Hell, I haven't even used our real names. Maybe I'm just lying about all of it. Maybe it's just as much make-believe as my whole existence. I suppose if there's something that I want you to take with you, it is that looks can deceive. Anything can be taken for granted and anything can be a lie. The greatest perceptible truth of a human life can turn out to be nothing. So maybe we should just enjoy what we have, for as long as we can allow ourselves to have it. Even if it's just a poker night with the guys. I guess, as the song goes, life is but a dream. Country Allen, Nelson Asada, Dice
Creepy Massacre 91, Leon Knott, SWAT, Kathy McGuire, Jimmy Griffin, Miss Eldridge, Dragon Slayer 048, Takeo Zarilla, Sanjay Anthem, Sleepy Shroomy, Mark Norman, Mina Lane Kidder, Richard French, yours truly, Omni Rubex, Sonic GMT, Wayward Son, Caleb Windsor, Never Enough, Russell and Flo, Stevie B 7649, Ray Weingartner, Stephen King 04, Shrimpo the Shrimp, Genevieve Sweet, Lone Wolf Sam, Ivory Sage, Lunas TV, I Am Loki 5849, Chicago